Hello everyone, welcome back to Kitaab Klub. Today I will be in conversation with Jananie K. Velu, the creator of Boundless Press, which is an imprint under Bindery Books. Welcome, Jananie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, so excited to talk to you about publishing and publishing with Bindery and how it's different. So
Mhm.
just to start us off, can you share what your journey has been like in publishing? Because I know you recently left your corporate publishing job and now you're working as an imprint and as a social media creator, right? So can
Yes.
you just take us
Yeah.
through that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I always wanted to work in publishing, and I worked in publishing for several years. I worked in Big Five, I worked in some smaller imprints, and then I also kind of shifted into just like tech, like book publishing adjacent tech industries. As just like, general marketing. And then, yeah, I left my corporate job earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's been like, I think 8 or 9 months. So I'm still getting the hang of it.
Mm-hmm.
But Bindery, I started with way back in, I think, 2022, 2023. Like, I remember getting doing the first meeting with Matt K, who's the founder of Bindery back in 2022, as
Mm-hmm.
he was sort of getting ready to launch Bindery.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was one of the founding tastemakers for Bindery. And so the founding tastemakers all launched with publishing imprints.
Okay.
And then that's where Boundless Press came to be. Yeah, which was
Mm-hmm.
very exciting.
Yeah. So when you were creating and like coming up with how Boundless Press would be and like, its missions and its goals and
Hmm.
also just, the different types of considerations you made when figuring out like the name or like just any aspect of it and like what books you're gonna have in the press. Like what were some of the things that you thought about?
Yeah, I mean, I came from publishing, so, I was very aware and familiar with the inequalities in the industry, and how, I mean, the industry itself is, lacks a lot of diversity. There's very few people of color, especially people of color and women of color in, positions of power. So that affects the books that get published. And, publishing is a historically underpaid and overworked industry, which I experienced too. So, yeah, that also affects the books that we publish. But I knew, as a book influencer for years that like I always wanted to see more representation of people who looked like me, people who had similar experiences to me. But I also just like I always enjoyed reading stories about people who may not even come from the same background as me or may look different from me, but the experiences that they go through. And a lot of those experiences were not ones that were getting published. So with Boundless Press, I mean, we were allowed to name our imprints ourselves, and we collaborated with Charlotte Strick, who's like the main designer for Bindery, on our logos. And for me, I had thought about naming my imprint after my YouTube channel, which is This Story Ain't Over,
Mm-hmm.
but it just felt like a mouthful. And I mean, part of the idea behind The Story Ain't Over was this concept that like, your story is endless, and there's always more to it, and that you should just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I wanted Boundless to kind of encompass that in some way as well, and also the concept that I wanted to publish authors from marginalized identities, mostly BIPOC authors, and just like publish them across many genres, because I am someone who has a very eclectic taste. I like everything from literary fiction to horror to fantasy. So, and my taste has changed a lot over, the past few years. So I didn't want to limit the imprint to any specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like Boundless kind of fit that, concept, like
Mm-hmm.
Boundless in both the ability to uplift these authors, and then also in the like content of the books.
Mm-hmm. You talked a lot about like what the process was like creating it, how has it been? Because you've had one book out now, Dust Settles North. How has the process of doing all the publishing stuff, like marketing and design and all of that for the book, been different from what your experience was like when you were working in corporate, like Big Five and other publishers? And
Yeah. So I worked in marketing when I was in corporate traditional publishing. And yeah, I've worked with both the Canadian market. I've also worked with like just North American market and then also into international markets. So Canadian market, you get very small budgets, like very teeny, teeny, tiny budgets. And the publishers, even the Big Five publishers, they're all very small. So there's only so much you can do for each book in that sense. But with the US and sort of broader North American, publishing, there is a lot more money to work with. And I mean, when I was working in corporate publishing, like I was always getting told, like, we don't have enough budget for XYZ marginalized authors, but they would throw like, 70% of the budget behind the white author's book just cause. Like there was never really an explanation, which I always asked for, which didn't make me the most popular person on any team. But with Bindery, what I love, and one of the reasons I signed on was that it was a way to combat some of the sort of disinterest and sort of like blasé everyday inability to give any attention to each book individually, because most people in publishing are working on like 20 titles a season or like, some crazy number, and they are, again, underpaid, overworked, and they don't have enough time. And so in some ways, like, although there's a lot of systemic issues with the industry, there's also just generally the issue of time. So with Bindery, because it's a model that has every tastemaker have their own micro imprint, each tastemaker's very focused on the titles within their imprint. That is their sole focus. Like we were focusing on like 1 or 2 books in a year, which is a lot of time and freedom to like do a lot more than you traditionally would. And then the other thing that I love about Bindery is that, we are trying to put more of the marketing and social media, coverage in the hands of the tastemaker who is already good at that, who has already had experience with that, rather than making a author, have to build a social profile and presence to market their book. And because, authors don't want to be doing that. That's like the antithesis to actually wanting to write. And I mean, with Bindery also, we work with a external production company called Girl Friday Productions. So although I'm doing like a lot of marketing and social media, we also have a dedicated marketing director under Bindery. And then Girl Friday Productions handles everything related to the editorial process. They also collaborate with Charlotte Strick on cover design. Charlotte's usually the one who works on most of the covers, and then she, will hire external illustrators and designers and stuff. And for publicity, we also work with an external publicity agency called Lavender, who are also amazing. So there's a lot of like different people, touching these books. So although it seems like I'm doing like everything on the outside because I'm doing a bunch of social media, in actuality, like all of these books are getting the same support, actually even more support than they would in traditional publishing from all of those different avenues. Like I'm not handling getting the book like stocked in stores or, if it got like a book box like that, that's not me. Like I'm just, shouting about it on social media and trying to get people to care.
Yeah, that makes sense. So since it's similar in some ways with traditional publishing where you have like sometimes another person who's working on the design and the publicity stuff and things, has there been, because what I hear about traditional publishing world is like authors don't get a lot of say in a lot of things and stuff. So is that something that Bindery is actively working on? Like for the cover designs, I'm wondering if the covers are beautiful, just like even like the ones under your imprint, but like all of them I've been looking at and they're just all so beautiful, but like also feel very authentic to,
Hmm.
the stories. And so I'm wondering how much say the authors had, and like even in like other aspects of like marketing, because like what I saw online at least was that Bindery like kind of has like very different like marketing tactics for each specific book, and they're like really focused. Like one of them even
Hmm.
had like a game made just to promote a book and things like that. So
Yeah,
I'm just
Cry
like,
Voidbringer.
yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Bindery is definitely different in that way. And I think it comes down to like the fact again that like they're very focused on creating a very sustainable and exciting process for the author, but also there's an added element of the tastemaker having read the book and, chosen this book to acquire, that, they can pull from that experience to, do everything for the book.
Mhm.
So there's like one dedicated, the tastemaker's that dedicated champion for the book who, in traditional publishing, like the marketing person or, publicity person, like they don't always have the chance to read all the books. So they're just kind of like doing things blindly, which is often what happens when you get like very tragically mismarketed books or just weird things happening in that regard, or it's just that they want to fit it into some kind of box so that it will sell because of that.
Yep.
But yeah, like in terms of authors getting a say, like me as a tastemaker and the author both get so much say throughout the entire process, like
Mhm.
ridiculously amounts of say. And we're actually like, I would say Bindery is very committed to letting us like in most cases like have the final say,
Mhm.
which I think is so important. Whereas in traditional publishing, like authors often are informed of things but are
Yeah.
never told or explained to what the reasoning is behind any of the decisions.
Yeah.
Whereas Bindery has been very good at communicating, which I think is also just a huge part of it, because it's not necessarily that the traditional publishing, you know, that the traditional publishers are trying to work against the author, but it's that they think that something is going to work, but they don't feel have the time or want to give the energy to explaining it to the authors. So like
Mhm.
one example is like cover design.
Yeah.
When I worked in publishing, like one very common thing that happens is that, usually you build a cover brief, which is something that the editor usually will build based off of having read the book and worked with the book. And then they'll also sometimes get input from the author, like what are some, wish list things that you want for the cover.
Mhm.
And then they'll kind of like give that to a designer and they'll go away with it and come back with concepts. And then the internal publishing team will sort of decide on some finalists, and then they'll send those to the author. And usually it's like one or two options or just one option that they think is good. And
Mhm.
at that point, especially a debut author who doesn't know any better, like they're like, oh, I just have to say yes. Like they're not really giving me any options. But like in theory, they could push back, and authors do. And they're told, no, this is what we think will work.
Mhm.
And in part, I do understand the reasoning in from publishers. Like I've had situations where I worked with authors that like we came up with a cover, they hated it, they pushed back, we changed the cover, and then that cover flopped. And so in some senses, like, authors don't necessarily know what's working in the market. And
Mhm.
then another situation that occurs is that in publishing, there's something called sales conference where you present, the titles to
Yeah.
retailers and sales reps and, get them excited to go sell the book. And very often that is when you get feedback from sales reps that could completely change the covers. A sales rep might be like, Target hates, covers that have blue on them, like just as an
Mhm.
example.
Yeah.
And so maybe the author really loved blue and blue was a really big motif in the book, but like the publisher is going to change that cover because they want to sell it into Target. So
Mhm.
things like that come up. But in the case of Bindery, like I think it's been a very collaborative process. Like they're trying to keep in mind all of these different considerations, but also try to stay true to the vision that the authors have. And then I think there's also the element that like we as tastemakers have a pulse on what like just regular people, readers in the community on social media are really into.
Mhm.
So we have a pulse on like what they will like. And there's been some cases where tastemakers will post like variations of the covers to their community and they'll get them to
Mhm.
vote on it. I did that for like the different colorways for our next book for Burn the
Mhm.
Sea. But ultimately, like again, the author has a lot of input. And one thing that I always tell my authors is that like if you hate something, just like tell me. If you don't want to feel like one thing a lot of authors really struggle with is like coming off as a diva if they say no to things. And I'm like, I mean, you shouldn't feel like that, but also if you feel like that, then tell me and I will be the diva. Because in
Mm-hmm.
this situation, like, it's my imprint and I have, they have a lot of power, but also like I also have a lot of power in the situation. And so, yeah, I remember like for Dust Settles North, we didn't really like the initial concepts and
Mm-hmm.
we pushed back. And Charlotte's very sweet. She's very good about, taking in everyone's considerations. So it's not like it was like a bad thing, like she was trying to
Mm-hmm.
force a bad cover on us, but she took the feedback and then she went back and brought us back something new. So it's been a very collaborative process in that sense. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then even with like the marketing boxes, like you mentioned, that's another thing where like we brainstorm as a group, like the marketing director, the author, the tastemaker, and we put our ideas together and we really try to build something that is like unique and authentic to the book. So there's just a lot of input that comes from the author and tastemaker in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like one thing that I've noticed, and you mentioned this, like the aspect of feeling like a diva for like stating your opinion or wanting a lead
Opinion.
is such a marginalized thing. Like,
Hmm.
I don't see white men thinking that. Like, when they say these things,
Yes.
like, there's no like feeling like you're being too much for something
Hmm.
that is literally your child. Like, that book is your
Hmm.
baby. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting.
Hmm.
Even with like, because now you have another book coming out in the
Yeah.
spring, Burn the Sea, and then the sequel was announced
Yes.
also for spring 2027. So has
Hmm.
there been differences you felt with how the publishing is going for that book versus Dust Settles North? Because that was like your first time doing
Hmm.
a full run, as
Yeah.
a tastemaker versus like the second time around.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, each book is different.
Mhm.
So for me, I mean, like just from the perspective of like Dust Settles North being my first book and Burn the Sea being the next one, I learned a lot through the process for Dust Settles North. And so when it came to Burn the Sea, I felt a little bit more prepared. Like obviously I was a lot more prepared than some of the other tastemakers, I think, who had never worked in publishing and never like seen how slow it is and
Yeah.
like all of the, things that are involved. So I had a lot more context in that regard.
Hmm.
So I felt like I was a little bit less anxious about the entire process from the get-go.
Hmm.
However, I do feel like as a tastemaker, I didn't know how I fit in the process in the sense
Yeah.
that like I wanted to give my input, but I also didn't want to like step on the author's toes or, again, just do too much in that regard.
Hmm.
Because yes, I'm the publisher, but also like it's not about me. So it's about this author and their book, which I always wanted to be mindful of that.
Hmm.
With Burn the Sea, I think one thing that was interesting is that like Mona wanted to be really collaborative with the edits on the book.
Hmm.
She really wanted to take in a lot of like what I had to say along with the editor. And like I reread the book like during the editorial process to like gut check things and then provided some more feedback. So that was something I hadn't done on Dust Settles North.
Hmm.
Also because I think, Dina and the editor kind of had it covered for Dust Settles North, whereas like Mona really wanted to get the reader reaction
Hmm.
from, the edited version. So that's why she wanted to like involve me in the process, I think. And that was kind of really exciting for me.
Hmm.
And then I think, this just being like the second book that I'm working on, it's just like I am better prepared. I also like, I remember at the beginning, it was really a struggle to explain, like, I have an imprint and this is the book that's coming from my imprint, and not like making sure that people didn't misunderstand that it was like my book that I had written. Like that was
Yeah.
a hurdle. Now it's a little bit easier.
Hmm.
And then the other thing I would say is that both books are vastly, vastly different.
Yeah.
Dust Settles North is like a historical literary fiction. Burn the Sea is a historical fantasy.
Hmm.
And so they're very different vibes.
Hmm.
And my authors are also very different in like temperament. So that's also interesting. But I do feel that like literary fiction is a much harder sell to the general public,
Yeah.
especially just to get them excited about it, because a lot of people don't want to read anything difficult these days, I will say. So it's a harder sell in that way. But I do think like Dust Settles North is a beautiful story that will have lasting power that like people will pick up, for years to come and really find value in. And so it's been interesting with Burn the Sea, like it's been so much easier to generate excitement simply because it's a fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
based off the genre. Like I don't have to say
Yeah.
much and then people
Mm-hmm.
are excited. So while that's great, it's also been frustrating, I think,
Yeah.
to see the response, and try to navigate that, I guess. I just wish that we didn't base our reading decisions off of like very superficial things, but alas.
Yeah, I feel like this is something I've been discussing a lot recently, but like genres were there to help us,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the beginning, and now they're like bogging us down, like as
Yes.
like again, like check boxes and like where
Yeah.
a book fits and things like that more than, you know, what the book is actually about,
About,
which is,
yeah, the
yeah,
context of it or
exactly.
like the value of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not to say like fantasies can't be very valuable, but it's like no one
Yeah.
really, yeah, it's not even getting to the point where you're like, interested in it based off of like even the concept. It's just, oh, it's a
Yeah.
fantasy. Or, oh, it has this trope. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, very interesting. I also, this is off topic and also not in this, but I was curious because
all good.
I did, I think, see one of your stories or something where you said that you also write and you're maybe finished
Yes.
a work in progress or like you're working on one right now. So is that
Yeah.
something you would consider publishing on? Would that be, it wouldn't be self-publishing, would it? If you were to,
Yeah.
or would you
So I think
wanna, yeah.
yeah, I think this was something I had asked Matt, like when we had launched, like, say I wrote a book,
Hmm.
would that be a conflict? And he was like, no, that's totally fine. Whether you go to a traditional publisher with it or whether you like want to publish it under your imprint or, whatever it is.
Hmm.
I think so for context, yes, I've always been a writer and I've recently got back into it and I'm working on a book right now. It's a weird one. So I'm not
Hmm.
quite done with it. It's kind of
Hmm.
like in early drafting
Hmm.
stages. I submitted it for like a mentorship program, just to give myself something to work towards. And I'm actually working on like a new draft now.
Hmm.
But I will say that like I want to see how it comes out completely first before I actually maybe
Think
try to get
about
it
it.
published if
Yeah.
I want to at all.
Hmm.
But yeah, it would be a consideration, I think, of whether like I go traditional publishing or if I want to publish it under Boundless Press. And then the thing is that like I feel like I would like to keep reserve Boundless Press for uplifting other voices versus my own.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would be a consideration. But yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. I feel like also what you were mentioning about like wanting to make sure that you're not like, or like figuring out your place in the
Yeah,
publishing journey in this, like makes a lot of sense. And that would kind of maybe muddy that,
muddy
if
the
you
water.
will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
also, yeah, because like with publishing, these like set roles have been set for like so long. Like you know who an agent is, you know who the
Mm,
editor is, and like what their roles are. That like now that Bindery is doing something different, and we have a tastemaker between that
hmm.
agent and the editor, kind of. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like just figuring that out is very interesting. So
Yeah.
you also mentioned, I'm curious also about like the editing process because you mentioned that for
Hmm.
Burn the Sea. Do you have an editor, like a wide range of them for like the different imprints, or like how does that work with?
Yeah. So yeah, it basically the editors that we work with are from the external production company that we work with, so Girl Friday Productions.
Okay.
Girl Friday works in a way that like they have a lot of different editors on like retainer, and
Hmm.
um, if we wanted to, we could request like a specific type of editor if we felt like the current roster didn't have one that fit the book.
Hmm.
But they would have to go out and like find one and
Hmm.
and get them involved. I will say like both editing experiences that we've had for both Dust Settles North and Burn the Sea have been absolutely wonderful. Um, and I'll be perfectly honest, like both of our editors were white. And I, at
Mm.
first I was like,
Yeah.
you know, but like,
Mm.
this is why you shouldn't just judge things based off of, one thing. But like both
Mhm.
editors were very, very mindful of the cultural and, personal experiences of the authors and how that fit into the book.
Mhm.
And I think like all of their edits were just absolutely fantastic. Like I remember when I had read both books, like obviously I had my initial thoughts and like feedback and whatever, but there's a reason that editors are so good at their
Mhm.
job, because they're very good at sort of identifying places to, you know, better the story without giving the author all of the answers, nor,
Mhm.
forcing them into a box and telling them exactly what they should do.
Yeah.
So they give them the opportunity to figure out their own way of, fixing that problem, or,
Mhm.
making the book better. So it was really interesting. I remember for Burn the Sea, well, so I had read like the edit letter for Dust Settles North. I loved it. Like I felt like he had encompassed also some of the thoughts I had on the book, that like I didn't know how to convey exactly.
Mhm.
Um, and then for Burn the Sea, I remember like I had read the edit letter obviously, and I was on like the editorial call that they did, but I also saw the like actual Word document with like all of the track changes and comments from the
Mhm.
editor, and then Mona's replies. And so that was very interesting to me. I mean, mainly because like when I worked in publishing, I was in marketing, so I wasn't really like in an editorial, like seeing all of that. Like I knew how it worked, but like I wasn't seeing it.
Mhm.
So that was also really, really interesting, just seeing like the creative ways that they like came up with things. Yeah.
Mhm. So, in terms of, because again, like I keep thinking about it in traditional publishing setting because that's what I'm familiar with.
Hmm.
But it's usually that like an editor picks their book that they want to sell to the publisher, right? Or that they want to
Yeah.
acquire. And
Yeah.
so, since in Bindery, it's you who's doing
Hmm.
that, is it also you who's like finding the right editor for the book, or like what was,
No, I would
yeah.
say so. I mean, even with traditional publishing, it's a lot of like, you know, the agent will like submit a book to an editor at an
Hmm.
imprint or whatever. And that editor might want to acquire it, but they still have to go through like the whole department, the
Yeah.
whole imprint,
Yeah.
to acquire that book, which
Hmm.
is like, usually in the form of like some sort of acquisitions meeting or
Yes.
something where they have to like vouch for this book to all the different departments, who will also weigh in on how they think it will sell, how they can market it, all
Hmm.
these different things. And then they'll, build a P&L and L and all this stuff. So there's like beyond the person's own taste and like desire to work on that book, there's like all these other departments involved.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say like in the case of Bindery, like we are kind of keeping in mind all of the departments and like how we would talk about this and
Hmm.
whatever, and then how we think it would bring value to the market, and if it fits under our imprint, and you know um just like if we believe in that book specifically and the author and whatever. So we're doing a lot of that like upfront work, and then we give it, when we acquire it, we meet with the author and the agent, and then we make a decision with Bindery. Bindery will let us know if there's like any, flags, but like literally they've never objected really to like if we wanted to acquire a book, like we're
Yeah.
allowed to.
Hmm.
They haven't dissented based off of like one book
Yeah.
specifically, is what I
Hmm.
mean. But yeah, so at that point, like Bindery and then Girl Friday Productions gets briefed in, and Girl Friday has like a project manager for each project, and then they will basically match the book with an editor on the roster,
Okay.
and then we'll get to hear their editorial vision. But the thing is that even that editor is going based off of some information that the tastemaker has filled out. Like we
Yeah.
will give our editorial notes, so
Okay.
they are basing their edits partly based off of what we think, and then
Hmm.
also what they think can improve the book, and
Hmm.
kind of trying to marry that together.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
it's a bit different from traditional publishing,
Yeah.
because I think like the personal touch of someone wanting that book, it comes from the tastemaker versus
Yes.
the editor. Yeah.
Hmm. So, can you share what's next for Boundless? I know we have these two books coming out, fantasy. Is it
Yeah.
a duology, or are we
It's a
can we expect?
duology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the first book comes out next April, and then
Hmm.
the sequel will come out the
Spring.
2027 spring. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. And since this is like an imprint in Bindery, but also you have like the book club and stuff, like what can we expect with Boundless in the future?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully more books.
Yeah.
I definitely want to like acquire some like different genres as well.
Mhm.
I really want a horror book. That's
Ooh.
been like on my mind recently.
Hmm.
And then, but honestly, it just depends on like what submissions I get and you know what I end up liking. In terms of Boundless is the book club. This year has been a tumultuous year, so it kind of fell off the bandwagon, and now I'm getting back into it. And
Hmm.
next year, I definitely want to do more with the book club, but we also, have our Discord, and I've been trying to get,
Hmm.
people chatting there as well.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and just overall, I'm excited to like continue fostering like the community as well. So
Yeah.
that's been nice. And I'm also going to be doing like more exclusive content for some of the higher tiers as well, which people seem to be excited for. So that's going to be good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. This has been very
Yeah.
enlightening.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much for doing this with me.